You don't get paid for the hour, you get paid for the value you bring to the hour. Welcome to the Property Mindset Podcast, where I'm Emma Howitt, mentor investor, and your guide to building wealth, freedom, and personal transformation through property. And property isn't just about bricks and mortar. It's really about living the life that you truly desire. And in this space, we don't just talk strategy, we really deep dive into mindset. And interestingly, it's something that I found is often missing in other industries, but it's been a real game changer in the professional property circles. So today, after this just cropping up a lot recently, I wanted to talk about the huge trap in our property industry. And that is, are you building a property business or are you actually building a property portfolio? So many people start in property with strategies like rent to rent to serviced accommodation, rent to rent to HMO, deal sourcing. This is where I started. I did rent to serviced accommodation. Um, and they hustle, they grow their revenue, and they reinvest into their business. And often they're really busy businesses. They probably hire a VA after a few months, they build a team, but suddenly they're really busy and it just gets busier and busier and they don't own any property still. So it's almost like they've been building a demanding job around the property, but not the freedom that they were really aiming for. So in this episode, we are going to unpack why this happens, how to spot it if you're caught in that cycle, and then, of course, how to change how to shift from this kind of more turnover, more stress to a plan that can actually get you owning assets and building that long-term wealth that you're looking for. So instead of taking a bigger wage, you're going to learn how to make a bigger plan. So as always, let's turn dreams into actions and actions into success. So let's deep dive into this property business trap, which I do see for some people. So, what do I mean by property business trap? So, this is inherently where you are building a service around property. So, that's rent to rent serviced accommodation. It might be HMO management, deal sourcing. It could be lettings, project management. I mean, there's a whole host of things, isn't there, that we can do and make money around property. And you can get really good and it can be really quick to generate active income. And it can grow considerably. And especially with rent to rent serviced accommodation, things like that, you can be really leveraged very highly on your monthly rental bill as well. So we have to be really aware of these things. And it might be that you are turning over more than you'd ever turned over in your whatever job you had before. But is if we're looking at your kind of personal balance sheet, your ownership is might still be at zero. And is that what you wanted when you started all of this? So I really see it all the time. Somebody starts with this rent to rent SA and they get 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 units. They've got amazing team an amazing team. They've got their cleaners, their systems, or it might be, and that's where I was at. That is what I did for the first couple of years of property, is I built that serviced accommodation, all rent to rent properties, and I was very, very busy. Or it might be that you are a deal sourcer and you're packaging dozens of deals, you're making really chunky fees, and on the surface, it feels really impressive. It's really good, but you've got such a busy diary. It's just constant activity, activity. It might still be that you're doing it on the side alongside your job, so it's just uber busy. And there's lots of kind of like feeling like I'm in property, that kind of energy that I am in property. But really, under the surface, if there are no assets owned, there's no equity and perhaps no long term security. So it's kind of looking around, how, if you want to buy property, how we can make that happen. So Jim Rohn put it beautifully. And he said, you don't get paid for the hour, you get paid for the value you bring to the hour. I'm going to say that again because I was mixing my words. You don't get paid for the hour, you get paid for the value you bring to the hour. So I'd also like to add that in property, you can also get paid over decades. Obviously, not everywhere, but often with assets that you own, they can increase in equity. So if you don't own something, it's definitely not going to increase. And obviously, as professional property investors, we purchase carefully and correctly so that there is opportunity for growth within those properties. So, if you haven't read this book, it really cements this distinction between working for money and having money work for you. And that's Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. So, if you haven't read it, it is literally a Bible. You must read it. And he just hammers home this difference between sort of an active income job and owning income producing assets, which is exactly what we're talking about here. So, what is this trap then? So, the trap is as the business grows, so do your expenses and so does your lifestyle. You got more money, going out doing nice things, but you then justify reinvesting everything to scale. You want to grow that business so that you can eventually purchase. And you tell yourself, once I get to X turnover, then I'll start buying. But quite often, because there's no clear portfolio plan, the day just never comes. And I speak to a number of people where I say, have you bought a property yet? And they're like, no, not yet. I was like, you got to do it. That's why you set up this business, to buy property. And people can wake up, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years later and just realize that they've built themselves a really busy job for themselves. So, really the key idea I want you to hold for this episode is your property business should be the engine that funds your property portfolio, not the destination in itself. So let's have a think through. So let's think through business versus portfolio, because these are two very, very different games. So if we were to separate them out and have clarity, it can often change our direction. So if we're looking at like game one, property business, this is active income. But again, it can depend on your time, your team, your marketing, and it can really grow fast. Mine grew really fast. And within 2 years, I could not believe I couldn't have dreamt to have the turnover that I did. But if I'd stopped showing up, if I hadn't turned up, then that could have very quickly disappeared, that income. And then you've got game number two, which is a property portfolio where you are a asset owner, and that, when run correctly, will produce income, potentially capital growth, and other options, such as refinancing. You can obviously sell, you can JV, you can borrow money to purchase. I mean, there's just a whole host of things that you can do with that asset. And you can keep, as long as it's set up properly, you can keep being paid even when you're sleeping. So even just a normal AST, a normal tenant, they're going to keep paying, as long as they're a good tenant. They're going to keep paying, whether you're around or not, if it's managed. So again, Robert Kiyosaki said, the poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. So a lot of people are kind of still in that first category. They're working for money in a property shaped business rather than owning the assets that money is working for them. So I hope that kind of makes sense. But here's a kind of a comparison. You have, one investor who runs a really successful sourcing company or maybe a rent to rent serviced accommodation business, and they're making 8 to 10,000 a month. They've got a small team, but obviously they don't own any of the property. They're utilizing property to help them generate an income, and that's fantastic. But if they were to stop, especially if you're a deal sourcer, if you don't source a deal that month, you're not going to get paid, and that income will stop. But if you look at another investor who has perhaps, they could be in the same situation. Both of these investors could have perhaps started with no or very little money. But let's say the second investor worked um, with um, other investors and joint ventured and actually bought property, and maybe they bought and maybe even shared the ownership of three properties. It could be an HMO, it could be single lets, it could be service accommodation managed by someone else. But their monthly cash flow, it is likely to be considerably less than the first investor, but they have got equity, they can refinance, they can have a long-term wealth trajectory, which is really very, very different. So investor A is building turnover, but investor B is building a net worth. So I hope that makes sense, because the danger is that with property, being busy can feel successful. And especially if you've got a great turnover, I mean, that, you are being successful. That is not being doubted in any way, but they're not the same. Your diary doesn't mean that your assets are growing. A busy diary, busy, these businesses tend to be really busy, busy businesses, but it doesn't mean that your assets are growing. So if you want to really sort of deepen this distinction between working in a business and working on a business, the E Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber is also a really fantastic read. And it basically helps you see where you've made yourself like a technician of your own property business instead of an architect of your portfolio. So what we have to do here is ask ourselves honestly, and the reason I can do this is because I had to do it myself. And so it's so key for us to do this is to ask yourself, am I optimizing for looking successful in the short term, or for being genuinely free in the long term? It's a good question to ask. So let's sort of think through our kind of, why is it that we stay stuck in a business like that? So some of you might be going, "Oh my gosh, this is me. This is me." And as I say, there's nothing wrong with that. This is exactly how I started. I didn't start with any money. I didn't start with any knowledge. It is a fantastic way to get started in property, but there are reasons why you might get stuck in that business rather than using that business to propel you into owning property. So here is a few big ones. So number one is that there is absolutely comfort in what you know. So you've learned how to find rent to rents, you learn how to build relationships, you know how to set up your properties. I used to love that. I used to love a spreadsheet, setting it all up, going to IKEA, buying stuff, having it photographed, deal packaging. You get a real buzz, don't you, from speaking to agents, viewing properties, making crazy offers. It's exciting. You get to be really comfortable in that position. It feels familiar. Buying your own property, taking on a mortgage in your own name, raising huge amounts of investor funds at that stage may feel unfamiliar. It may feel risky. We then have a kind of identity thing. So number 2 is your identity. It may be currently that, yeah, I'm a deal sourcer, or I am a SA operator, I'm an HMO manager. And when your identity is really wrapped up in your business model, to change it, you're going to feel uncomfortable. It makes you feel out of your comfort zone because you are unconsciously feeling that that is my identity. And to suddenly change that can be challenging. And that's totally, totally natural. Before you were a deal source or an SA operator, you weren't. So you had to go through those changes to get there. Then, this is huge. We have number 3, the lifestyle creep. So suddenly, you may have perhaps had a job before where you're earning okay money, but now you've got a lot of income coming in. There's a huge cash flow. And, quietly, your lifestyle may have expanded. You might have only gone out for dinner, I don't know, once or twice a month, and now you're going out twice a week. You might have really great holidays. You might be driving a really fancy car. Okay. And that is great. Okay. But instead of creating, an asset fund, you're basically just creating an expenses fund. Okay. Which goes against the whole reason why you started out in the first place. And the last one is kind of just a lack of a clear portfolio plan or goal. And we do know that when you get in the car and you need to put a goal, you need to put the postcode of where you want to go. So if you don't have that goal, you don't have that plan, it's just going to be too vague. Yeah. And you need to give it deadlines. So vague plans are rarely going to beat really strong habits. So one of my favorites, Napoleon Hill, wrote in Think and Grow Rich, a goal is a dream with a deadline. So we must make sure that we do that. But if you're kind of really keen in turning a sort of a vague desire for more property into an actual dated, non-negotiable goal, then definitely do read that book. It's absolutely brilliant. Um, but then there's also this kind of deeper belief at play. I'll start buying when I earn more. But from what we've spoken about, the more you earn, the more dinners you go to, the more holidays you have, the nicer your car. And then you become the same. You've got zero surplus. You just constantly invest it back into the business because that's what you do in business, isn't it? You invent it back into the business. So if you're kind of recognizing some of these things in yourself, it would be great to read The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I hope I've pronounced that right. Housel. It's really good to explore this book. It kind of shows how our behaviors and the stories that we feed to ourselves around money often actually matter more than our knowledge. That sounds a bit crackers, doesn't it? But it can help you see why I'll start when I earn more really rarely works. So we need to kind of shift. I'll shift from kind of like I'll buy when there's extra left over to I decide now that buying assets is non negotiable. Like I am going to build the business around that decision and then things will start changing. So, how are we going to escape this trap? So, let's start getting practical, shall we? So, I've got something called the 3 bucket plan. Um, and this will help you use your business to build your portfolio. So, if we start off with this kind of simple framework, and this is all about like every pound that comes into your property business has got 3 possible jobs. Okay, so bucket 1 is your lifestyle. And so this is kind of what you pay for yourself. Now, quite often, and I was talking to a fantastic mentee of mine, she runs in fact, a staging company. So another really fantastic business around property. And we were talking about the fact that, she lived a great life, but was, potentially starting to spend a bit of the earnings. Of course, you want to. You're working really hard. You're doing really well. But actually, you've been perfectly fine up until now on what you were living on before. Perhaps you were going on holiday, you were still driving a car, whatever that is. But if you were perfectly fine getting by, just say, right, I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to set a cap for at least the next 1, 2, 3 years, whatever feels right for you and whatever's going to work to build your portfolio. So decide on that number that you can live on. And I'm not suggesting that you start struggling, you can't pay your bills. That's not what I'm suggesting. It's working out a plan that can help you get there. So I don't know, it might be 2 grand, 4 grand, 6 grand, whatever it is. It depends on your personal circumstances. If you're ready to take your property journey to the next level, check out my Property Success Mindset Formula. It's a course on Udemy, and inside you'll discover actionable strategies and exercises designed to shift your thinking, boost your confidence, and help you navigate property challenges with clarity. Whether you're just starting out or looking to break through to a new level, this course delivers the mindset tools professional investors use every day. Visit the link in the show notes to unlock your property potential. Your biggest asset is not just your portfolio, but the way you think. And then it's all about committing, isn't it? So I commit to automatically, not increasing my income for me personally, but knowing that that is going to be going towards building my portfolio. Warren Buffett has got a great line. He says, "Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving." That was a bit of a tongue twister for me initially. I had to really sit there working it out. So it's do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. And this is really what this point is about. So it's kind of flipping that usual pattern. Don't upgrade your lifestyle every time the business grows, but upgrade your plan. Okay, so that's bucket one, your lifestyle. Then you've got bucket two, which is your business. And this is really like the engine. So this is your operating costs. It might be your rent, it might be software, vehicles, marketing, your team, your staff, your VAs. It could be systems, training, because, you know, your business is a busy business. A lot of things that need to run, and those can cost a lot of money. So, what we want to do here is to keep the business running tightly but healthily. Again, we want to pay our team well. We want to be doing things, and we want to invest in what genuinely will grow or stabilize the business, not just what looks good on Instagram. So, you might be able to have a van for carting furniture around, but does it really have to be the most modern van, the most expensive van? Just really think about that. Do you want to look good on Instagram, or do you want to be growing a portfolio? um, then bucket number three is the assets, the portfolio. So this is the part that, as we've spoken about, a lot of people have missed. They've skipped this. So you decide each month on a fixed percentage of profit that you ring fence for your growing your assets. And I can highly recommend an amazing book called Profit First by Michael Michalowicz. Please, please, please go and read that. And that will kind of help set this out in a very sort of simple way. It's really good. But decide on this bucket. Is it deposits towards purchases? Is it going to be your legal surveys? all the fees that are linked to kind of acquisition? Or is it money that you put into JVs, buy, refurnish, refinance projects, whatever it is? But it's thinking about, well, what percentage am I going to use? Is it 10%, 20%? And it's not even necessarily about the amount, it's about the habit. It's the habit of doing that. And if you always get into the habit of siphoning money into your asset bucket, it might be quite small for quite a while. And that is perfectly fine. But you've got that commitment, that plan that you are going to get there. And you're training yourself along the way. Because I am an investor who buys assets, not just I run a property business. So Warren Buffett also said, the most important quality for an investor is temperament, not intellect. So your temperament is kind of it's what keeps you paying yourself a disciplined wage and moving that money from your bucket, your lifestyle bucket, into the asset bucket. And even when you're tempted to upgrade that car or add in another subscription, really think, is this the outcome? Is this going to bring my long-term goal? So if you want a really kind of practical property specific guide to thinking like a long-term owner, then The Millionaire Real Estate Investor by Gary Keller is fantastic to read. So with this, you can literally sit down today, this week, and map your last 3 months of your business income into these three buckets. Have a look at it. What have I got? What could I shave here and there? What could I put into this asset bucket? And what percentage is it that I can continuously do each month? So at this stage, it may be that it's zero. You haven't got even a penny to put into that asset bucket. Um, and I hope that this is therefore a wake up call, because we need a starting point and we need to get from busy operator to asset owner. And guess what? I've got 4 practical steps um, that you can do. So, step one, and this is always right. You get in your car, you need to put something into the sat nav. So, step one is set your clear 3-year property portfolio goal. It's it's going to need to be a couple of years, because it's not that quick and easy to buy property. It can take a while. There are quicker options, but I really want you to think through what we can do. So instead of I want some property, you've got to get really specific. So, how many properties do you want to own in the next 3 years? What kind of net monthly income do you want from those owned assets? Because remember, it may be that you have a serviced accommodation business. So, why not then run your owned assets as serviced accommodation, and you'll get a much higher return, hopefully. um, from a mortgage rather than paying rent. And then again, what kind of property do you just so I know some deal sources that will sell, for instance, 4 deals and then buy the fifth, and they just want fairly vanilla properties that don't require too much management. They don't necessarily bring a huge amount in, but it's just this constant sell four, buy one, sell four, buy one. And they are massively growing, and they might not be expensive properties. Obviously, they're buying sensibly. I'm not suggesting you just go and buy the cheapest property out there, but it's knowing what you want to do. Um, so yeah. And then obviously write these down, your clear goal, and put dates by it. So that was step one, set a goal. Step two is to really commit, this might be challenging, to your income cap and your asset percentage. Okay. So choose, I am happy to live on this personal wage, and I'm going to allocate this percentage of the profit for the next, 1, 2, 3 years. So, it might say I pay myself X pounds per month, and I commit to putting 10, 20, 30% of net profit into my asset bucket every month. Okay. And you've got to make this really quite boring. It's got to be automatic. You've got to actually set up the standing orders between bank accounts. And again, going back to Profit First, Michael Michalowicz, he really helps you understand and do this. So definitely have a look at that. Also, if you need help turning those long goals, because we're talking 1, 2, 3 years, that is a very long, long time. And it's quite hard to have that real push and emphasis. So, a great book to help you break that down is The 12-Week Year. I love this by Brian Moran and Michael Lennington. It's absolutely brilliant. I do this and it helps you treat each 12 weeks, I suppose, like a year. I'd never really thought of it like a year, but every 3 months inherently you have your plans, your goals, and it's brilliant because as time goes on, it's like, oh my God, I'm nearly at the end, I'm nearly at the end, I've got to keep pushing, pushing, pushing. Whereas often if we're just running on a year, we start panicking in September and that may be too late. So it all talks about scheduling into focus sprints instead of, vague kind of, oh, I'll start buying one day. Then step 3, start your investor and finance conversations now. So I was speaking to a fabulous lady who is building a really great rent to rent serviced accommodation business and has raised already investor finance, is absolutely smashing it. It's doing so well. So it's kind of like, well, just carry on. You're clearly good at that. Carry on doing it. Still, make the money from your rent to rent serviced accommodation business and now really concentrate on building those investor relationships to finance your property portfolio. Because it doesn't have to be, oh my gosh, I can only spare £50 a month. It's going to take me 60 years to save up a deposit. It doesn't have to be like that. You have now got an incredible asset of having a property business. People really respect you. You've got so much going for you. People are going to naturally want to invest in you. So go out and find it. So really look at how you can attract those JV partners, and remember, you're doing amazing. People will be attracted to you and will want to work with you. And if they don't want to work with you, that's perfectly fine. Someone else will. Um, and ensure that you present your current numbers, your current systems to investors who want, hands off property deals because you can help them. I love Zig Ziglar, and this is a quote from him. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. So, and I know this is so hard, imposter syndrome, all of that, but don't wait until you feel big enough or established enough to talk to investors. Your operational experience is valuable right now. Step 4 is scheduling what you can call it whatever you want, but your portfolio power hour. And this has to be every week, and it's a minimum of an hour. Can be more, but no less than an hour. This has to be non negotiable. It's time in your diary where you don't work in your business, you're working on your portfolio. It's time to analyze potential purchases, speak to brokers, agents, solicitors, review your 3 bucket plan, and move money into that asset bucket. And really map out your purchase timeline, speaking to investors as well. So, putting aside that hour forces you to start doing stuff because you're going to feel a bit silly, aren't you? You just sat there for an hour going, "Oh." you know, you've got to actually do that and make it non negotiable. And remember, consistency beats intensity. If you have kind of ever struggled with sticking to habits or, felt like the way you are is kind of lagging behind your goals. I've mentioned this a lot of times, but Psycho Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz is just such a fantastic resource. So do go and read that. So your business is amazing. And it can be a really beautiful thing, your property business. It can give you skills, income, relationships, and opportunities. But what you've just got to remember is that that end goal was never just to be permanently busy. Okay. And if it was, then that's fine. You're in the right place. But if the goal was freedom, security, and choices, that's that comes from what you own. So, here are your actions. So, make sure that you write down your 3-year portfolio goal, number of properties, net monthly income from those owned assets, and decide your personal your personal income cap and your asset allocation percentage. And then book in, diarise it, and, come hell or high water, that is what you're going to do. Your portfolio power hour. Put it into your diary and treat it like a meeting with your future self. And then message me, tag me, share your business to portfolio decision, whether that's your goal, your buckets, or your first portfolio power hour. And I would be so excited, and lots of others will be excited to cheer you on and keep you accountable. If this episode has given you a bit of a mindset shift, I'd love you to go and listen to my episode number 2, which is the mindset shift, breaking free from property myths that limit you. And this is on so this one I talk about those kind of biggest myths that keep people from starting or moving forward. Again, so it might be I need lots of money, all of these things that hold us back. So go ahead and go and listen to that. And if you know someone who is run off their feet running a property business but doesn't own much, then please do share this episode with them. Sometimes one mindset shift is all it takes to change the trajectory of the next decade. And do remember, property success isn't just about what you do, it's about how you think and the state you're in when you make decisions. And when you combine a smart portfolio strategy with a disciplined owner level mindset, there's no limit to what you can build over the long term. And as always, your mindset is your greatest property. Keep building it.